Origin Gents, welcome to UX, and this is why tourism to Afghanistan is booming. Our channel Real Life Lore. It's been a while since I did a Real Life Lore video. This is one of the latest one. Yeah, I think there was a clip about of Taliban basically, let's just say doing something as an ad. I'm like, how does that work as an ad? Why would somebody go there? But then again, there are people who visits North Korea. I would never do that because just the risk involved. So there are thrill seekers out there who would be like, this is what I want. So this actually worked. All right, this is gonna be awesome. Let's do this one.
Something strange is happening in Afghanistan. Ever since the Taliban regained their power in the country over the summer of 2021, tourism to the country has been spiking higher with every passing year. And now there's more people visiting the country than in decades. In 2021, the year that the Taliban triumphantly returned back to power again through a shocking military offensive, only 691 people from abroad were brave enough to visit the country as tourists. The next year, in 2022, those numbers more than tripled to about 2,300 tourist visits. And in 2023, the numbers tripled again to around
9,000 isn't that booming. Is it like people have like way too many people visiting in something like Dubai and things? So 9,000, is that even booming?
7,000 tourist visits. In 2024, the numbers continued increasing with 9,000 tourist visits, and in just the first 3 months of 2025 alone, more than 3,000 tourists have visited the country, exceeding the numbers who visited throughout the entire year of 2022 and setting Afghanistan on track to break 2024's record with the fourth year in a row of continuous tourism growth since the Taliban reconquest. And with promotional tourism ads to the country the Taliban is pumping out like this one, how could you even resist?
We have one message for America.
Welcome to Afghanistan.
Now that is a great ad if you ask me, but
There's no way in hell that ad is real. Is that from actual Taliban? Actual people run the government? You're kidding me, right? I guess that shows you the mindset of what people are thinking, and that's what attracts the people. If they can make fun of things like that, they're not going to be so strenuous when things happen, I guess. I don't know. The people are not in walking on eggshells when they go to Afghanistan, so they'll be like, yeah, it's going to be fine probably type of way. I don't know.
all of these tourist visits to Afghanistan are taking place despite the fact that virtually all Western governments, including the US and UK, still maintain the highest level of travel advisory for the country and urge all of their citizens to avoid all travel there. So what exactly is going on here? Why are so many Westerners suddenly traveling to Afghanistan in the thousands? And why does the Taliban, infamously reclusive and
Why are people climbing Mount Everest, even though there are too many dying? Like, that's not really a question, is it?
totalitarian, even want all of these Westerners visiting in the first place? Tourism to Afghanistan used to be a lot more popular with Westerners in the past. Setting aside all of the political turmoil and strife, the country's landscape is spectacularly beautiful with soaring mountains, wide valleys, and crystal clear blue lakes. Among the most gorgeous landscapes in the country that rivals all of the best national parks in the United States is Bamiyan National Park, which was the first national park established in Afghanistan during the US occupation era in 2009. It is sometimes
I was about to say that. Just ask American troops, they'll tell you. Yeah, they probably established all this shit. There you go.
As the Grand Canyon of water, and its shimmering crystal blue waters contrast magically with the surrounding rock cliffs. It's a truly beautiful area, but in a sign of what makes visiting Afghanistan so troublesome today, the Taliban has banned all of their women from ever visiting this national park and restricts it only for men. Between the 1950s and 70s, there was a popular overlanding.
Why? I guess they don't want them to go to swim and wear clothes that might resemble them. Is that what it is? I don't know. Banning women to do some things because that that goes against their religion makes sense when it makes sense based on their religion. Like if they were to wear some clothes or something, so going to gym because they would wear gym clothes. I'm pretty sure it's banned in here, right? In here, why? Because they might go for a swim. They just okay, no swimming in the water, but they can still go. Why ban women to just go there? That doesn't make sense.
journey developed among the hippie subculture in Europe that came to be known as the Hippie Trail, which took thousands of Westerners through Afghanistan on their way to India and Thailand. This route introduced tons of Western tourists to Afghanistan for decades, but of course, this journey was only possible during a relative era of stability in Western and Central Asia that wouldn't last for long. It all began falling apart in the late 1970s, with the communist revolution in Afghanistan in
Yeah, it just makes sense. From Afghanistan to Coast Mountains. Yeah, okay.
1978, the Islamic Revolution in Iran the following year in 1979 that overthrew the previously pro-Western regime there, and then the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan later that year that threw the country into more than 4 decades of continuous warfare, all of which basically eliminated the path for hippies to take directly overland anymore. It also did that after the Taliban first took over Afghanistan later in the 1990s, they basically just did about everything they could to discourage tourism even further. At the crossroads of civilizations for thousands of years in Central Asia, Afghanistan has an extremely rich culture and an abundant potential for historical tourism too. Perhaps the most well-known historical wonder in the country that could have attracted a large amount of tourism in an alternate timeline were the Bamiyan Buddhas.
Ooh,
a
yeah.
pair of monolithic Buddha statues carved into the side of a mountain relatively nearby to the Afghan capital, Kabul, that for centuries were among the tallest statues found anywhere in the world. They are believed to have been painstakingly carved out of the mountain face more than 1,600 years ago, sometime around the 6th century AD, with a shorter Buddha standing about 38 meters high and a taller Buddha standing about 55 meters high, substantially taller than the Statue of Liberty itself is. This taller Buddha was probably the second tallest statue in the world for more than 1,500 years until the mid-20th century, when modern technology finally enabled the construction of a bunch of taller statues. The only other statue that remained behind for most of those 1,500 years of history was the Leshan giant Buddha, which was itself also painstakingly carved out of a mountain across an entire century in China that was completed in 803 AD, and which stands at 71 meters in height. Historically, Buddhism had been a major religion present in Afghanistan for well over a millennia, until it was weakened by the Islamic conquest in the 8th century and was finally
It just makes sense. Like Gautam Buddha was a prince who like just saw like how like he was rich and everybody was poor, everybody struggling, so he just gave all that up, became Buddha. From India spread to like China and everywhere else, so like from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and spread like that.
extinguished by the Mongol invasions in the 13th century, leaving Islam behind as the overwhelmingly dominant faith in the country ever since. For nearly all of the history of Islamic rule in Afghanistan, the Bamiyan Buddhas were either accepted or tolerated due to their historical significance, but controversy still persisted over their presence nonetheless, owing to Islam's own general restrictions on depicting the human form in art and statues, and the fact that the statues eventually came to represent idols from a long-gone religion in the region. In the 17th century, long before the Taliban, the Muslim Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb was the first to order the statue's destruction on
Back up.
in art and statues, and the fact that the statues eventually came to represent idols from a long-gone religion in the region. In the 17th century, long before the Taliban, the Muslim Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb was the first to order the statue's destruction on religious grounds.
What? Wait a minute, he was under the control of Afghanistan, was in the control of India? Aurangzeb was like that, like from these Mughals from India, right? That they Delhi Sultanate and everything. But they came from this place, obviously. But around this time, they would be like there, right? Yeah, they would be there. So like Afghanistan was part of all that, and Aurangzeb actually ordered the destruction. That's something.
And briefly had his artillery open fire on them. While they caused damage, they weren't powerful enough to destroy the statues outright, since they were carved out of a literal mountain. And so Aurangzeb essentially gave up trying. But his attempt to do so would later be invoked as a precedent by the Taliban centuries later in the 1990s during their own decision to destroy the statues too. During Afghanistan's communist era in the 1980s, the Soviet-backed government applied to make the Bamiyan Buddhas a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which was never formalized because this government collapsed just a few years later and Afghanistan fell apart into civil war in the 1990s. During this period of the early 1990s, before the Taliban seized power in 1996, there were multiple instances of attempted Taliban attacks on the statues based on religious grounds. Some Taliban members
Come on, man. Just But yeah, the statues and like idols is banned in Islam, I think. So that's one. But does that really count something like, I don't know. Does it say anywhere like you have to do any statue or any idol you come across? You can depict it, but you didn't. This is like very old one, like 1600 years old. At the time, Buddhists did that. So do you have to destroy it? Is it part of the religion? Does your religion says you have to destroy it? I mean, come on.
attempted to blow the Buddha's heads up with explosives. Others fired RPG rockets at them, and some others burned tires around their heads. Nonetheless, in 1999, a few
Nobody has TNT. This good old TNT, like put there, like wire it up. That would do the job. Come on.
years after the Taliban took over the country, the Taliban's absolute leader at the time, a reclusive man named Mullah Omar, initially ordered that the statues be preserved, and he even expressed their value as a potential asset for tourism.
I mean, yeah.
Nonetheless, just a couple years later, in March of 2001, the Taliban suddenly reversed its course and declared that all statues depicting humans throughout the entire country would be destroyed based on the religious grounds that they were idolatrous, including the by then 1,600-year-old Bamiyan Buddhas. This sparked a major international crisis at the time that was quickly forgotten about because it was almost immediately overshadowed by the 9/11 attack.
What crisis? That they're going to destroy some statues? Who cares? That's not an international crisis. They're destroying statue in their own country. That is not crisis level. It's a statue, sure, but in the end, it's just a statue. What are you talking about? It's their own country. It's a statue. Like, yeah, you can get pissed off about it. But like international crisis is a strong thing.
Just a few months later, there has also been a huge amount of speculation as to why the Taliban suddenly changed its mind on destroying the statues in 2001, after having decided to protect them just a couple years previously in 1999. One of the more interesting theories is that the decision to destroy the statues, and to destroy arguably the country's most important tourism site, was heavily influenced by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden in order to deliberately isolate the Taliban from the rest of the international community even further, and thus to strengthen the Taliban's dependence on Al-Qaeda at the same time. It's been theorized that Al-Qaeda might have threatened to cause trouble in the country unless the Taliban relented on destroying the statues. Years later, Mullah Omar himself would claim that he ordered the statues' destruction because he was deeply offended by the international attention towards them. He said that after Western governments and NGOs approached him with offers to help with restoration work at the statues, he was outraged that they wanted to help with the statues, but not the countless Afghan human beings who were dying of hunger. So to him, blowing up the statues apparently seemed like both a point of spite and a way to eliminate them for good.
What are you talking about, man? That's not how anything works. Or people that were like reaching out to like repair the statues, they're different people. The people who would help out your people would be the countries, and this is where diplomacy comes. You can only, like delete poverty by economical means, by doing business with countries. You have to be lenient with other countries. You can't be too strong about it, right? Like you have to be like, if you want to do business with something like USA or any other country, you need to meet with the terms, right? You need to like lower your restriction on things. Otherwise, countries just won't do business with you. That's where the problem lies. You can't really blame the people who want to like preserve the statue.
Good in order to refocus international aid efforts on Afghanistan's own struggling population. Beginning in April of 2001, the Taliban began making preparations to destroy the Bamiyan Buddhas that went on for weeks, while the horrified international community made just about every appeal to save them that you can possibly imagine. Every single member state of the Organization of the Islamic Conference intervened in protest against the Taliban to try and save the statues.
Really?
Including the only three governments that recognized the Taliban at the time: Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The Pakistani government even went so far as to send a delegation to Afghanistan to stop the destruction.
Hold up there. So are you saying you're so Islamic that these Islamic countries doesn't even count? These are Islamic countries as well who hold Quran as their leader. If they don't have an issue with the statue, why do you want to destroy it? Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. You think because of your religion you have to destroy these statues, but these countries also are Islamic. Like, if they're fine with it, like, what's your problem? I don't get it. Like, what is the justification there, right? Pakistan, UAE, and everybody, like, yeah, like, come on, preserve the statue. So I don't know. You could have. I think Islamic countries should have that thing. Like, we have the same religion, We should discuss religious things, right? So there should have been like that, like courtesy, like that, like Pakistan, UAE, like, okay, let's talk about it. And if there's a convince them, like, okay, don't destroy it, this shouldn't be a thing.
And argue that doing so was against Islamic principles, citing that the statues had predated Islam and coexisted with Muslims for more than 1,000 years who had never sought the statues' destruction. Mullah Omar reportedly callously responded to the Pakistanis by simply saying that the statues were never destroyed by previous Muslims because they lacked the technology and means to do so, not the will to do so. The Indian government offered to transfer the Bamiyan Buddhas to India for safekeeping, while the Japanese government suggested a plethora of different solutions than just blowing them up for good, including relocating the statues in full to Japan, covering the statues up in order to hide them from view, or
How do you do that? How do you carve out the statues? Isn't that a task in itself?
a lump sum of money to preserve them. Dozens of letters from countries all around the world urged the Taliban to spare the statues, but the Taliban's mind was already made up. The Bamiyan Buddhas that had stood for 16 centuries would be no more. The destruction of the statues was conducted methodically. The Taliban fired anti-aircraft guns, RPGs, and heavy artillery at them, blew up their feet with anti-tank mines, and finally drilled holes into them where they planted explosives to finish the job. By the end of April, the two statues had been completely obliterated forever, and Afghanistan's greatest historical wonder that could have attracted tourists for generations to come was lost.
And that fucking sucks, man. It hurts, man. I didn't see what's going there. I was just like, I was still hoping like they weren't able to destroy it, and now like they want to preserve it because they're doing tourism something. But damn, like they destroyed it. That hurts, man. I'm not really like preserve the statue guy or the guy who thinks about that. But like when this happens, you think about it, like that hurts, man. That stood there for so long, millennia, and like it's something that's lost, isn't it? Damn, all right.
And will never again be replaced. The site where they used to exist is still one of the most popular places to visit by tourists in Afghanistan today. But one has to wonder just how much more popular the site would be had the Taliban never done what they did to them in 2001. The fact that
9,000 people, that's nothing. I think it would be like more, like double digits or more. 50,000, 60, 100,000, some shit like that. I think people would have visited like as soon as they could have, if that thing was still there. UNESCO site and everything, if it had tagged like that, they could have like gone for like another wonder of the world type thing, right? And it would have worked. Like that's just fucked up. Another thing, like, okay, look, I'm all for religion, but religions needs to be modified for the modern world. Otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Taliban did the same thing. Right now, they could have made so much money. They're not. Like, what did you achieve anyway? Even the other Islamic nations were saying, like, don't destroy it. This has nothing to do with Islam. This is older statues. Like, come on.
The Taliban themselves were the ones who destroyed the statues is an awkward subject in the country still today, when they are trying to actually attract tourists to come to the area. During a recent press conference in 2024, the Taliban's acting tourism director in Bamiyan was asked about the Buddhas, and he simply replied, "Next question." But the Taliban did a lot more to undermine Afghanistan's long-term tourism potential in the 90s besides for just blowing up those statues. You see, one of the most attractive things about Afghanistan during the 90s to a specific kind of tourist was that there basically weren't any laws and you could get away with things there that you couldn't anywhere else. To a cadre of wealthy Gulf Arabs, 90s Afghanistan became the place to go to hunt and poach whatever you wanted, especially rare endangered birds. Afghanistan sits along major migratory flyways for many species of birds flying between Siberia and the Indian subcontinent, and is an especially important habitat for the Asian houbara, a now vulnerable species that was nearly driven to the point of extinction in the 90s by these wealthy poachers from the Gulf who came to Afghanistan to blast all the birds they could find. The Taliban basically didn't enforce any environmental regulations whatsoever.
Why
and they tolerated all of these Gulf state poachers coming to the country because they brought in both cash and diplomatic clout for their struggling regime. The long-term environmental consequences associated with destroying the country's wildlife was apparently not heavily considered. And Afghanistan's bird and mammal species—
that's the least of their concern, let's be honest. Wildlife going out of whack isn't like, all the problems Afghanistan have, that's not in the top category. Come on.
have still not recovered from this time period, undermining the country's potential for wildlife tourism as well. The continuation of the Afghan civil war, even after the Taliban seized power in 1996, the regime's brutal treatment of women, its international isolation, and their hosting of Al Qaeda all meant that tourism to the country by Westerners remained very low. And then came the 9/11 attacks, the subsequent US invasion of Afghanistan, and another 20 years of occupation and warfare, where the Taliban became an insurgent force that disincentivized tourism even further. After more than 4 decades of nearly constant warfare and strife, the Taliban managed to overthrow the US-backed government in Afghanistan over the summer of 2021 and returned back to power again, bringing a sort of brutal stability to the country for the first time in generations. Rapidly after
That's to America, but here's a phone. Like, here's a technology from America. How? What?
regaining control, the Taliban began reinforcing their extremely harsh restrictions on women and girls in the country again, to the point where some observers have labeled it a form of gender-based apartheid. It goes far beyond simply banning women from the country's national parks. The Taliban have banned women from all public parks in the country as well as gyms, reserving them all exclusively for men. All
That, look, man, I'm just like, now it's just men being dick. That's what's happening. Let's be honest. Gym, okay, gym clothes, but then again, like, you could wear like full burqas and things and work out. Why not? Like, what laws does that violate? What Islamic law does that violate? That national park thing, okay, don't go for a swim. Just going there, how is that an issue? All other parks just banned. Like, what the hell is even that? Like, I don't even understand. Like, right, all the, like, every other restriction you can think of the past when it comes to anything Islam, you knew like where the restriction is coming from. Like, it's usually clothes, right? Like how women are presented, right? Like, that's the problem. And you actually understood that, like, okay, that's where the religion is coming from. I understand that. But here it doesn't even make sense. Like, what does parks have to do with anything? Where does in any Islamic law it says like women can't go to park? Come on. This doesn't even make sense, man.
beauty salons have been shut down. Girls have been forbidden from receiving any education beyond the 6th grade. Women have been
What?
barred from virtually all forms of paid employment. They're mandated to wear full body and face coverings at all times while out in public. They're subject to harsh punishments, including death by stoning for crimes like adultery, and even their movement has been sharply restricted, with prohibitions on them ever being allowed to leave their own homes without a direct blood-related male relative or husband. Women are basically
Okay, this is just fucked up, man. See, human nature is fucked up. Even amongst the law, I can already see somebody just point blank lying and saying she did adultery and like people just stone her to, yeah. How in 21st century, in 2025, how do you process this? There are some area where women are treated like that. What? These are humans. This is like that witch thing, right? Like, oh, Salem witch trial. Oh, she's a witch, and that's it. No trial needed. There's way too many accounts of some jealous boyfriend just saying, like, because she didn't, respond to the advances, she's a witch, and that's it. This is in right now. This shit is happening right now. Like, imagine all the horror you can imagine where these things can be exploited. No more education beyond 6th grade. What does education have to do with anything? None of this makes sense to me, man.
completely segregated from men in the country, to the point where women are not even allowed to speak to men who they are not related or married to, including the male tourists who travel to the country from abroad. This point is brought up often by Taliban tour guides today. Male tourists who visit Afghanistan are strictly only allowed to speak and interact with Afghan men, and never women. While ironically, female tourists who visit Afghanistan are granted a little more freedom and are enabled to interact and speak with both men and women alike. Foreign women who visit the Taliban-ruled country are not held to the same super strict standards as Afghan women themselves are. The Taliban has declared that foreign women visiting the country are only expected to wear a headscarf while out in public, rather than the full body coverings expected of Afghanistan's own women, while foreign women are also granted access to the country's parks and other restricted areas. It is precisely the Taliban's harsh, misogynistic treatment of women that has made Afghanistan the global pariah state that it is ever since they took back control again. The country has been sharply internationally isolated for years now, with hardly any international recognition, complete with overwhelming sanctions and trade embargoes imposed upon it by the Western world that has resulted in crushing poverty. Afghanistan now has the second lowest GDP per capita on the planet, and out of its 41 million people, an over
Ooh, okay. 2 to 5,000 GDP. Afghanistan, like yeah, look at Africa, man, that's insane. This is not because of sparsity, by the way. It's GDP per capita, right? Like per person type of way. So just because you're lower population doesn't mean, like, if anything, that should help with it. So just seeing those red means like, how bad is Africa doing, man? That's insane. What the hell? What is this? Burma? Is it Burma? Yeah, it's Burma. What the hell? Why is Burma? What is it called? Myanmar, Burma. Why is it? Why is it like so red? It's doing that. Like, what about those awesome highways and that golden temple? What about that then? All right, this is just insane.
Overwhelming 75% of them are believed to be living at the subsistence level in extreme poverty on less than $1 a day. By far the highest ratio of any country in the world today, meaning that Afghanistan is now more deeply impoverished than even any country in Africa is. In order to keep its population content and to stay in power for the long haul, the Taliban believe that they must do whatever they can to improve their men's living conditions and standards and gain more international legitimacy. And they believe that due to their crushing sanctions, the best way to do that is by capitalizing on Afghanistan's remaining tourism potential to acquire hard foreign currency. Despite the Taliban's previous undermining of tourism appeal in Afghanistan in the 1990s, there still remains a certain appeal to visiting the country by Westerners today. It can be seen as a kind of adventure, a visit to a raw.
I'm sorry, man. I don't care if you invoke religion or whatever. Women are treated like that. Like, yeah, I don't like. I wouldn't give my money to tourism at that at all. Like, if you do this shit, no, I don't think so, man. What are you, high? Only education beyond 6, stoning, all that. Like, this doesn't make sense in the modern time, man. This is beyond common sense. Like, you could say like, oh, this is religion, this is culture and all that, but there should be a hard line of common sense. If whatever you have, whether it's religion or whatever, goes beyond common sense in the modern world, where you use smartphone, you have this kind of views. How does that make sense? You can't be selective when it comes to like modernism or anything science related. Either you believe in science or not, right? Like, this is just weird to me, man.
Beautiful, isolated country that few other Westerners have ever been to. Visiting Afghanistan provides a tourist with a level of bragging rights and interest. And there are also often financial incentives for tourists, just like there are for the Taliban. Afghanistan under the Taliban's rule generates a huge amount of interest online on social media. So posting videos from visits to the country are likely to garner a substantial amount of attention and help to grow an influencer's following and earn money. This, in turn, presents a double benefit to the Taliban. Influencers bring in hard currency for their cash-strapped regime, and most often bring a positive coverage of the country out that is carefully curated by the Taliban while they're there, which the Taliban views as being helpful towards improving their overall international image and legitimacy. Tourism officials appointed by the Taliban have also pointed out that visiting their country, hilariously, is not as strict and oppressive as visiting North Korea is. Unlike North Korea, the Taliban say that they won't force their tourists to be constantly shadowed around by a state security escort at all times, and they're generally free to come and go wherever they want as they please, so long as they respect all of the Taliban's edicts, customs, and laws. And the level of violence experienced in the country is also just much lower now than it has been at any other time in decades. Part of why Afghanistan was so violent all throughout the 2000s and 2010s was because the Taliban themselves were the ones that were waging the violent insurgency against the government, which they've stopped doing since they retook power again.
What the fuck is even that, man? Violence is much lower. Who did the violence? Yeah, that was us. But like, yeah, it's much lower because we are now in the power. By the way, there was millions stabbing back in the day. Now it's only 10,000. You're gonna be fine. Yeah.
So far in 2025, there were more than a dozen other conflicts happening around the world that have killed more people than the
Active world conflicts by estimated deaths. Damn! Ukraine, obviously. Gaza again, obviously. Mali. Sahel insurgency, okay. Sudan, Myanmar. Oh yeah, Myanmar thing. Is that why it's red? Okay. Because like that's the thing happened, okay. Mexico or drug war, okay. DRC, Russia, obviously. Somalia pirate thing. Syria thing. Ethiopia, another insurgency. Haiti gang war, why not? Ecuador, drug war, yeah, okay. Then Yemen, and then Afghanistan. Damn, alright, that's heavy.
smoldering conflict in Afghanistan has. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any risk of violence at all. For example, there's a major branch of
It made the
ISIS
list.
that's present in Afghanistan right now that's known as the Islamic State Khorasan Province, or ISK, which, if you can believe it or not, is strongly opposed to the Taliban's regime in the country because they feel that they're not quite hardcore or extremist enough. ISK is believed to have several thousand men under their command as fighters, and they've continually waged a violent insurgency against the Taliban ever since they retook power again, with the goal of overthrowing them. As a result, ISK has been known to deliberately target Western tourists in the country with murder and kidnappings in a deliberate campaign.
Every time there is another one who's like, oh, you're not extreme enough. I'm the most strict and extreme group of them all. There's always happens shit like that, and they're like more strenuous. They'll block tourism, they'll block any economical advance, and then they're like, oh, I don't know why we are poor. Oh, I wonder why. I don't understand this. Like, oh, I'm the most extreme one. Like, you're not being like you're not upholding a religion strong enough, and just like interpret religion whatever the way they want and get even more extreme than like Taliban. All the shit we just like heard is already too extreme. Treatment of women and everything more extreme than that. What is that?
To undermine the Taliban's tourism strategy, and thus to undermine a key source of the Taliban's funding and legitimacy. In May of 2024, a group of 3 Spanish tourists who were visiting the remains of the Bamiyan Buddhas were all gunned down by ISK militants, representing the first deadly attack on foreign tourists in the country since the Taliban regained their power. It is for this reason that most Western tourists who visit the country and leave the urban area of Kabul will end up hiring armed security to escort them around, which are usually contracted out by private security companies or even directly by the Taliban themselves. The costs will vary depending on the level of risk in the region. A local armed driver might cost a few $100s a week to hire, while multiple armed escorts and armored vehicles necessary to reach some of the more remote and dangerous areas can run up into the thousands of dollars a week, which the Taliban are more than happy to accept.
Why do you have to go there? So if you have to do all that thing, like, okay, is planet Earth planet Earth doesn't have some awesome things that most people don't even know about? You think there are not remote, desolate places that are beautiful with deserts and like whatever? You think there are no islands in Pacific Ocean that are just awesome? Find something. Why do you have to go there where there are like active people trying to shoot you?
But other times, the Taliban themselves are the ones who detain Western tourists for what often seem like arbitrary reasons. In 2022, the Taliban arrested an American tourist visiting the country and held him for more than 2 years before releasing him in 2024. In early 2025, the Taliban arrested an elderly British couple who were visiting the country and have held them ever since, with no officially stated reason given for their detainment. It's for these reasons why virtually all Western countries continue maintaining—
Okay, then what the fuck? You actually release a video saying like, come to Afghanistan, it's a tourism, and at the same time you're like, oh, we'll just hold you indefinitely and won't even tell you. Why the fuck would anyone come?
a maximum do not travel advisory for the country, but nonetheless, it's fairly straightforward to do so if you actually want to. Tourist visas to Afghanistan can be easily, cheaply, and quickly acquired at the Taliban-run consulate in Dubai, while cheap flights from Dubai and Istanbul fly directly to Kabul multiple times a week. You only have to accept that when you travel to Afghanistan, you do so at your own risk, and you are placing yourself at the mercy of the Taliban and their laws. It's also probable that the pace of tourism to Afghanistan will continue growing at the same pace as the Taliban's legitimacy as well. Once shunned by the entire rest of the world, cracks are beginning to form in the international community's resolve to keep the Taliban isolated. Very recently, in July of 2025, Russia took the unprecedented step of becoming the very first country to formally recognize the Taliban as Afghanistan's legitimate government, complete with the raising of the Taliban's white and black flag at the Afghan embassy in Moscow. Russia's decision to do so was driven by a plethora of complicated factors. Ever since invading Ukraine, Russia has faced a cascade of major geopolitical setbacks in the Middle East and Central Asia.
I mean, Russia has become a pariah in a way. That is what pariah means, right? Shunned by everyone. So of course Russia is going to be like, you know what, Taliban's also the same thing, so I'm going to legitimize Taliban because that's the only move I can think of. I don't know.
Its close ally in Syria was finally overthrown while Western governments rapidly recognized and embraced its Islamist replacement. It failed to intervene to save its treaty ally Armenia from crushing military defeats against Azerbaijan in 2020 and again in 2023, and then suffered through the humiliation of a US-backed peace agreement between them in 2025 that undermined Russia's centuries of historic influence in the South Caucasus. It failed to respond to Israel and America's bombing campaign of its other regional ally, Iran, over the summer of 2025 as well.
This is a reach, man. Russia was never going to answer that. Like, what are you talking about? It's like Iran didn't directly involve with Ukraine and Russia thing. As far as Israel, it's a different between Israel and US. The relationship is different. Russia never said we're going to get involved. So why would they?
Russia therefore felt pressured that it needed to take bold steps in order to restore its image as a global great power that can still set the international agenda in this region. And what better way to do that and anger its enemies in the West at the same time than by setting the precedent for recognizing the Taliban's government in Afghanistan? Russia also hopes that by becoming friendly with the Taliban, their regime will allow Russia to one day construct natural gas pipelines across their territory from Turkmenistan that'll connect the Russian gas pipeline network directly with the increasingly lucrative market in India, enabling Russia to pivot even more of their gas supplies away from Europe.
I don't think the pipeline would go that way. I think pipeline would have to go from but still that would be a problem. A pipeline would have to go through Pakistan, which is a problem itself. Even the Kashmir that belonged to India, Pakistan took by force, kind of separated Afghanistan and India's border. So there is no way to take pipeline from Afghanistan to India unless Pakistan is involved as well, which I don't think India would accept. Because next time conflict happens, Pakistan would just cut the supply and India would be caught with what are we going to do now? So that's never going to happen. This pipeline is never going to happen with India.
Europe and towards other countries that don't really care so much about Ukraine, like India and China. And Russia is far from being alone in choosing to engage with the Taliban despite their vast human rights abuses. As of July of 2025, the Taliban maintains diplomatic missions to 23 different countries around the world, more than double the number they had just the year previously in 2024, including full-on ambassadors that they've appointed to Russia, China, Pakistan, the UAE, and Turkey, with lower-ranking officials positioned in more than a dozen other countries, including many European ones like Bulgaria, Czechia, the Netherlands, Spain, Norway, and Germany. As a result, Russia's recognition of the Taliban's government 4 years after they seized power may only be the herald of several more countries who will shortly follow suit, improving the Taliban's legitimacy globally and improving their ability to continue attracting tourists and earning money.
See, if you have a problem, you better have an alternative. Otherwise, you don't have a problem. So when it comes to Taliban, if that's a problem, what is the alternative? West doesn't have the alternative, so people will eventually okay, might as well recognize them now. But what are we going to do? Invade Afghanistan again? People are not going to do that. So I guess it's better to accept them than not. Otherwise, you're just creating human crisis. If you don't if you don't accept them, if you don't do business with them, country get more poor and poor, famines happen, and that will be on the world, I guess. In the end of the day, Afghanistan will ask world to help, so it's world's problem anyway. If you don't have answer to some problem, it's not a problem. You just accept it at that point and move on. I think that's what world is doing.
Circumventing Western sanctions in the process. And whether you're looking to travel to Afghanistan or anywhere else, you'll need phone data in order to actually survive. When I'm outside of the country abroad,
sadly,
my US carrier
going?
charges $10 a day to use data, which starts stacking up pretty fast, and even then, it's also capped in terms of usage per day, and I
don't even know how that works, man. You can just get data from this SIM card. How does that even work? Does it use other cell towers from other companies? What? Yeah, well, go to original video page and from there support this channel, or go to saily.com/real-life-lore. This was interesting. The video is insane, the tourism video. Everything that followed was kind of oh, come on, man. The women thing kind of it's just stuck here. That specific thing, they can't get more education in 6th grade. Why 6th grade specific? And certain thing, they can't go to park. Why can't they go to park? All right. That was why tourism to Afghanistan is booming. Our channel, Real Life Lore. If you like my next one, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.